Hi, I'm Paul Peterson.
And I'm Leslie Finger. Paul, what are the key arguments in favor of merit pay?
Merit pay theory says that two good things will happen if you pay people according to performance. First of all, you'll provide incentives to teachers to take their obligations to teach seriously. If they know that their compensation is affected by the amount that students learn, they're going to work harder in the classroom. So that's one argument in favor of merit pay. The second one is the kinds of people that go into teaching will change. The ones who are confident about their abilities to teach will find that profession more attractive, while those who are less confident will decide that other fields might be more attractive. So those are the two main arguments for merit pay.
This sounds a lot like market theory, which you discussed in the last segment.
Well, it is. And to some extent, merit pay and market theory are all the same thing. It's a particular application of market theory. It simply applies to education, a practice that's used in the private sector where people tend to be paid according to performance, or at least what the boss thinks is performance.
Okay, so those are the arguments for merit pay. What about the arguments against merit pay?
Well, there are 6. You can get cheating, you get teaching to the test, and the tests don't cover everything that's taught. Many of the teachers can't be evaluated according to tests. Then you have to go to principals, perhaps, and that can lead to favoritism. 5th, a student's performance on a test may not be completely connected to a teacher's ability. It's affected by other things. And 6th, school cooperation will be undermined by the competition among teachers. So there's 6.
Wow, okay, that's a lot. Let's go through them one by one. So what's the concern about cheating?
Cheating is a serious problem, and that's a problem whether or not you have performance pay, but it gets worse if you have performance pay because teachers have an incentive to make sure the students do well on those standardized tests. And we know from a 2003 study in Chicago that there's significant amount of cheating taking place even in the absence of merit pay. About 4 to 6% of classrooms had some cheating taking place within them. The way that cheating was studied was to find out whether or not the wrong answer was being given by most of the students in the classroom. And when that's the case, then you know somebody's going through the test and changing the test. They may have not known the right answer, but they were changing the answers on that test. So they pretty much convinced everybody that there's a significant amount of cheating. In other places, such as Atlanta, it's become a serious issue in the media. So we know that cheating is a problem that we have to take into account if we're going to have merit pay proposals.
But if cheating is that serious, then merit pay must not be a good idea. The teachers who cheat would get the higher pay.
Well, there is a way around this. If you have well-trained outside proctors administer the examination, then you can contain cheating because the proctors' salaries are not going to be based on performance, but simply on their good work as administrators of the exam.
Okay, but even if the cheating problem can be addressed, isn't a test a very narrow basis for evaluating a teacher? There's more to learn than passing a test.
Well, that's true. But the counter-argument is that the test measures the material that the students are supposed to learn, or at least it should. So really the argument should be, is this test actually testing what students should be learning in this particular class? If the test is doing that, then why shouldn't they be teaching to the test?
But what about the teachers who are teaching subjects that don't even have tests? What can we do there?
Well, yes, and it's true that first and second graders are not taking tests, kindergartners are not taking tests, high school teachers are teaching subjects that currently aren't being tested. So there's a lot going on in the school system, art, music, other courses that aren't part of the testing regime that now exists in our schools. So you could not possibly have a merit pay system based solely on testing.
Okay, but then what's the solution to this problem?
Well, the solution that's been proposed has been to have the principal do the evaluation, or perhaps other observers come to the classroom, or perhaps have parents evaluate the teachers, or students evaluate the teachers. Well, of course, each of these approaches has its own problems. Does the principal really have the time to assess every teacher? Do the teachers change their teaching style when they're being observed? So do those outside observers really see what's going on most of the time? If teachers review one another, won't they give each other a pass and say, hey, that teacher's doing a good job, she thinks I am too? Do parents have a good enough idea of what's happening in a classroom to evaluate teachers? How about students? Can you trust them? Won't they trade good evaluations for good grades? So it's pretty hard to come up with a foolproof evaluation system. Some people think, well, okay, maybe we should have a little of each. If you can't have any one best system, just have a little of each.
Okay, so it seems like of all these factors, principal's opinion should be given a considerable weight in merit pay decisions. But can we even trust principals? I mean, do they know who the good and bad teachers are?
Well, there is a study out there, again in Chicago, which has been looked at more than any other place, that has tried to figure out whether or not principals can make a good job. When Arne Duncan, the U.S. Secretary of Education, was the school superintendent in Chicago, he gave principals the ability to dismiss weak teachers simply by click on the computer and the little checkbox on the computer at the end of the year. So the teacher was told, if they didn't have tenure, that they would have to go on to a different school. So the study looked into the question by looking to see which teachers had students that were learning a lot and which teachers had students that were learning very little. And he found that the principals were asking the teachers who were the weak teachers to move on to another school. There was a pretty good correlation between the principal's judgment and the teacher's ability as measured by test performance. The study found that principals were particularly accurate in identifying very good and very weak teachers. And this implies that any merit pay plan should probably focus on identifying, say, the top 20% and the bottom 20% of the teachers, because that's where principals did the best job of identifying who was effective and who was not.
But what if one teacher has a classroom full of hardworking, serious students with good home lives, and another has students who are more difficult, they're behind, they have rough home lives? Wouldn't merit pay be rewarding the teacher for factors beyond his or her control?
Well, that's what teachers are especially concerned about. A teacher who is not very good, but has a classroom of students whose parents help them at home and get tutoring, may do better, have a classroom that does better than a teacher who is actually very good, but whose students have difficult home lives.
So is there any way to solve this problem with merit pay?
Well, people who have developed merit pay systems try to take into account student performance before they arrive in the classroom, and they try to take into account the socioeconomic background of students. It's not a perfect system, but it does correct for some of these characteristics. And you cannot rely on tests alone. You have to rely on principals or other administrators evaluating teachers and using their own good sense. So you need information about how well students are performing, but you need judgment as well.
But great schools need teachers to cooperate and work together. Wouldn't merit pay undermine this spirit and generate competition and ill will?
That's another concern that's been expressed by teachers. They have said that this is a unique enterprise. It's not like selling cars. It's like making a school work effectively. If we pay each teacher according to that particular teacher's performance, we're going to undermine the kind of cooperation and education that is fundamental to having a good school.
And how many school districts actually have merit pay plans?
Well, the opposition is so intense that according to one study, only 3.5% of school districts in the United States have performance pay. Even those programs that do exist are fairly weakly designed. Performance pay is only a small part of the total pay package.
Do we have any research evidence that actually shows that merit pay works?
There are a few well-designed studies which estimate the effect of merit pay on student achievement. We're going to discuss those studies in the next part of this lecture.